Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello, I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our justice system and our legal system, and how they intersect with the citizens of the town of Colonie. Today, we're truly fortunate to have one of New York State's outstanding jurists, who happens to also be a resident of the town of Colonie. This particular jurist has a long and stellar career throughout the legal field, and we're so lucky to be able to get some time with him today. And please help me in welcoming Supreme Court Justice Eugene Devine. Judge, thank you for joining us today.
Peter, thanks for having me.
Well,
it's a pleasure to be here.
We're thrilled, and we certainly don't have enough time to cover so many exciting things that you've done throughout your legal career, and currently, of course, serving.
How exciting they were.
Well, certainly the town is very proud that as a town resident you are Supreme Court Justice in the state of New York. But so many things happened before that as well. Judge, how did you get involved in the legal field to begin with?
Well, let me start off by saying that I was born and raised in the city of Albany, and having moved to the town of Colonie in 1992, I'm very happy to be here. I've enjoyed my time here, and there was a time when I wasn't quite sure I could make the move from the city of Albany to the town of Colonie, but I'm extremely happy about it. As you know, I ran for office out here. And I'm glad to be a contributing member of this community, and feel that I've gotten more from Colonie than they've gotten from me.
Well, history will be the true test of that, Judge.
Well, we'll see.
We appreciate your modesty too. You went to school in the city of Albany, high school?
Yep, I went to grade school and high school at a school that no longer exists. It's called VI. It was Vincentian Institute. And it was a great school. It was a great education. And I look around today, and across the hall from me is Joe Teresi, who's also a Supreme Court judge, a graduate of VI. Neil Breslin, our state senator, is a graduate of VI. Mike Breslin, who's our county executive, is a graduate of VI. Mike Connors made a mistake and went to CBA. Mm-hmm. And but other than that, there's a lot of fellows around and women around who are contributing currently, and the school's been out of existence for over 35 years. It was a great school. I played football there, and we won our diocesan championship back in 1967.
Fantastic.
Pretty much I was an Albanian. My father was born and raised there. My mother was originally from New Jersey. But I'm an Albany guy.
And where did your college training take you?
I understand you went to Boston College.
That's correct, Judge.
I went to a school that used to be a rival of yours. I went to Villanova University, and Boston College decided to leave the Big East. And
that's true.
We're very disappointed because it was a sure W every year for Villanova. But I went there, and then when I graduated, I went to Albany Law School. And after that, started practicing law.
Judge, you spent a tremendous amount of time in the Albany County Public Defender's Office. In fact, for no less than 11 years, you were the county's top public defender. When did you first get into the public defender's office?
Well, I was the public defender from 1996 until I took this office in January 1, 2007. But I graduated from Villanova in 1971. And that summer, my summer job was with the Public Defender's Office. I continued to work there summers through law school. And about a year after graduation, once I was admitted to the bar, I took a part-time position with the Public Defender's Office, so that all in all, I probably had 25 years with the Public Defender's Office. And people should understand that public defenders, the chief public defender and the assistant positions during all that time until 2007 were part-time positions. So I also had a private practice of law as well.
Judge, your exposure as a young man into the political system and the legal system was second to none. You had your own family was involved in so many, in making laws and in administering laws, that it gave you great insight into the entire legal system. Could you tell us a little bit about your family background in the
Sure.
legal system?
Well, I grew up in a very political household. And my father was the county treasurer for the County of Albany for approximately 22 years, I believe. And at that point in time, the county treasurer was the highest elected official in the county. It would be the equivalent today of the county executive. Sure. And he was a member, as you had to be in those days to get elected, of the Albany County Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party at that point in time was run by a man called Dan O'Connell. And many people call it the O'Connell Corning machine, but frankly, it was the O'Connell organization, I always felt, up until Dan O'Connell's death, which was, I think, and don't hold me to this, only about 5 years before Mayor Corning passed away. There was a very rigid and strict chain of command. And the county treasurer was responsible for the county. The mayor of the city of Albany was responsible for Albany. And there was the party treasurer that was responsible for running the day-to-day operations of the Democratic Party. And it was all overseen, and they all visited Dan O'Connell on a weekly basis. You know, all that was overseen by Dan O'Connell as chairman of the Democratic Party. And that was the kind of organization that I grew up in. There's some funny stories that arise out of it, and you know, there was always talk about how corrupt the organization was, and you know, that votes were purchased for $5, and that dead people voted. And, in all honesty, I never saw any evidence of it, but I remember in 1971, and I've told this story often enough. There's a fellow named Tom Colonie. Tom Colonie's still alive and a practicing lawyer and a great guy, and we're very good friends. And Tom was running against my father. And in those days, you never had a debate. There were no such thing as political debates. When the County Democratic Party anointed someone, they became the candidate, they got elected, and there shouldn't be any dispute about that. And so, but there was a time when Teresa Cook and Tom Colonie and several others, either Republicans and or independents, were challenging the party. And so Tom Colonie was running against my father, and they were going to have a debate. And I was a freshman in law school at the time, and I was very concerned because, you know, I knew my father as my father, but I didn't. He was an attorney. He was a practicing attorney, and obviously skilled in trying cases and things like that. But I had never seen him in that capacity yet as a young man, and I was very concerned about his ability to debate Tom Colonie.
Sure.
So there was a crowd, and it was broadcast on a local station, and the crowd watched the debate, and Tom Colonie held up a piece of paper, and he said, Mr. Devine, I have here the names of 250 deceased persons who are currently in either St. Agnes or Albany Rural Cemetery who voted in the last election. Can you explain that? And it was about a 5-second hesitation. But you ever watch a movie where time stands still and everything goes into slow motion?
Sure.
Well, everything went into slow motion, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God,
yeah.
They finally got these guys. They caught him red-handed. He's got the names. How's he going to answer this? What's he going to do? And my father said, after about what it actually was about 3 seconds, he said, yes, I can explain it. They would have lost their county jobs if they hadn't voted. And with that, the whole thing was diffused.
Right.
The 250 names weren't real. Right. And but it was a very, very funny moment, and it was typical of what the party was always accused of. So anyway, that's the kind of household that I was raised in. Very political, very democratic, and I realized that when I ran for office in Colonie, that this was the only town where that would cause me a problem.
Well, your background and experience is certainly no problem whatsoever as you currently sit on our behalf as a Supreme Court Justice. And part of the fascinating background is your involvement with the Public Defender's Office. And you have told us already that you got involved in the Public Defender's Office right after college, before you even started Albany Law School. And over the 25 years or so of your involvement in the Public Defender's Office, have you seen any trends or changes that have occurred in public defense?
Well, I think one obvious thing is the incredible growth in crime over the last 30 years or so. When I first started, I think there were 5 or 6 public defenders. Now you have to remember that the public defenders, as you know, in your court in Colonie, we're responsible for being in every single justice court, every town court within the County of Albany, the city courts in the cities within the County of Albany, and the county courts, which deal with felonies. And I realize that your town courts and your city courts also deal with felonies, but usually they start there and wind up in
That's right, Judge.
in county court. And as I know you know well, but people out there might not know, that almost every single crime, the prosecution starts in the lower court. Some start in county court, but most of the time they start in lower court, they get disposed of by way of reduction or a plea to a reduced crime or a preliminary hearing, and if so, get sent up to county court. When I first started, I think we had 5 or 6 assistant public defenders that handled everything, and on the day I left in December 31st, 2006, there were 35 public defenders. Not only in the criminal area, but during my tenure, during the last 11 years where I was the public defender, we also took over the duties in family court and defend certain people that are brought in front of the family court judges. So there was a growth in crime. There was a growth also in the type of cases we handled. We had 5 or 6 people just devoted to family court by the time I left. One of the other areas that has kind of been a growth industry, if you will, and you see it, I know, in Colonie, is the specialty courts. You know, there's a drug court, there's domestic violence court, and what the Office of Court Administration has been attempting to do is have these specialized courts so that the judges that sit there are more experienced in the particular kind of case. For example, you know, drug court is, I think they take DWIs now, which they didn't when it started. It was just drugs. But they're treatment courts where people who maybe shouldn't be in the justice system, the criminal justice system, we try and get them out and divert them and get them treatment, and hopefully with that treatment they don't become recidivists. I'm not sure, so I'm going to ask you a question. In Colonie, do you have your own drug court, or are they referred to?
That's right. We do
city?
not. One started some years ago,
Yeah.
and I think Judge Herrick decided that it may be more beneficial if all of those cases were in one place. And so that I think he eventually took them all when he was in the city court, and I think he's running a felony drug court now as well at the county court level. Right. But the City Court of Albany is still providing an outlet for drug court, and sometimes I'm asked to consider allowing one of our cases to be processed through there.
Right.
But when I do that, typically what will happen is the defendant will plead guilty to the charge and then the sentence will be that they're successfully discharged from the drug court.
Right.
And if they're not, then they're brought back
they're
to me
for sentencing.
to face any other penalties allowed by law.
Right.
And I've done that sometimes upon request in that way, but we don't maintain our own.
Right.
But there's no question that the volume in the 9 years that I've been fortunate enough to serve the town of Colonie as a town justice, the client base for the public defender's office is increased exponentially.
Yeah.
And in that way, and I think the Court of Appeals is continuing to suggest that more and more types of cases deserve attention by counsel, which puts greater emphasis on the obligations of the public defender's office, which is paid for by the citizens of the county,
Right.
typically.
Right. And, you know, in conjunction with that, one of the things that many people don't know is for, I'm going to say 20 to 25 years prior to the creation of drug court, we had an office within the public defender's office called alternative sentencing. And we had 2 employees who full-time, upon, if, let's say, for example, I were the assistant public defender in Colonie, if I had someone who I did not believe belonged in the criminal justice system but needed some kind of help or some kind of treatment, I could bring that case back to the office. They would work up some kind of treatment plan. They would also find a provider, and that would allow me as an attorney to go back to the court and try and convince the judge and the district attorney, let's not put this person in jail. Let's have an alternative to incarceration, and let's get maybe 30 days of inpatient treatment, then some kind of outpatient treatment for drugs and or alcohol, and maybe we can have less of a burden on the criminal justice system and really help somebody. And you know, it was an uphill battle at the creation of that. And by the time drug court came in, the judges and the district attorneys were the ones who were pushing it. And you know, that was a major, major change in the entire criminal justice system. Whereas at one point it was the defense pushing for it, and we actually got to the point where we had to kind of try and put the brakes on the program.
Right.
Because there were certain issues with pleading your client guilty and not even knowing what the sentence is going to be if they fail. And there were a lot of issues where
That's right.
all of a sudden we went from being the proponent of something to saying, oh, wait, let's not go so fast. So it was, that was a big change, but a good change, I think.
Judge, we've mentioned the Public Defender's Office and how it is primarily funded by the taxpayers of the County of Albany, but so is the District Attorney's Office. Did you find that the offices were kind of on balance in funding, or was it acceptable that one didn't have the funding as the other did because the scope and breadth of one department might have been more involved than the other?
Well, no. If my true belief is that if everybody's entitled to counsel, and they should be, you know, God forbid it's you or me,
Right.
and we can't afford an attorney, and we're wrongly accused. We're entitled to an attorney.
Absolutely.
Even if we can't pay for one. But was the funding equal? No. And is it fair? No. You have to remember something, that when a person is arrested, the police are there, they're on the spot, they investigate it, very often have a chance to talk to the defendant. By the time that case gets to the district attorney's office, it may be too late to help anybody. By the time the public defender gets to talk to them, they've probably made a statement, the investigation's over. If there was search, seizure, fingerprints, or whatever, that's all gone now. The investigation was done last night. You're talking to your client for the first time in the morning. The car's gone, the vehicle, any of the things that may or may not have been used to commit the alleged crime, everything's gone. So all we have is a defendant who doesn't even have enough money to afford his own attorney, and the package has already been wrapped up in a nice little bow and delivered to the district attorney's office. And they wind up probably, the funding is at least a third more for the district attorney's office. And the district attorney can go to the public and say, we're making the streets safe, we're doing this, we're doing that. And the public defender goes to the public, what do they say? We're going to represent criminals? Where there's no constituency out there. People like Alice Green, I respect Alice Green and the people who are advocates for the poor within the criminal justice system and without, more than anybody, because they really do a service that nobody else is going to do. And they're the only voice that many of these people have. And so consistently, we bat our heads against the wall, and we're outfunded, outmanned, and so on and so forth. So that's just the state of affairs.
Now, since you've become a Supreme Court justice here in the 3rd Judicial District, you've probably seen some fascinating cases as well, and of course, we know judges are precluded from speaking about any case that isn't yet closed. But judges here in the 3rd District actually are exposed to types of cases that Supreme Court judges in other districts in the state aren't.
Right.
And why is that, Judge?
Well, first of all, the type of case, we have jurisdiction over any type of case. It's the court of highest trial jurisdiction, other than the appellate level in the state. So we can do criminal, we can do civil, and what we get from day to day are, car accidents, negligence cases, slip and falls, divorces, foreclosures, any type of contract lawsuits, any type of litigation that you can dream of is within our jurisdiction. But what we get here in Albany that's different from, we'll say, a judge in Rochester, are what is called Article 78 cases against the state. A Supreme Court judge in Rochester might get an Article 78 against the town within their jurisdiction, but we get the ones against the state. So what that does is, for example, without commenting on the merits or anything else, there's a hospital. New York State created a commission called the Berger Commission.
Right.
The Berger Commission studied different hospitals, and Ellis, I think, was the hospital around here that got a lot of attention.
Yes,
because they were under,
with Bellevue. Yep.
Bellevue.
Yes,
yeah.
they did.
And they were under a closure order.
Correct.
Well, there's, we, because the case has to be brought here, there's a case from Rochester involving the closure of a hospital in Rochester. Well, that comes here.
Right.
Because the state's involved, Berger Commission. In addition, there's a case from New York City where the police officers in New York City haven't had a collective bargaining agreement, an agreement on their salaries, a union agreement, for about 3 years now. And one of the pieces of litigation having to do with that negotiation wound up coming to Albany because the Public Service Commission's involved. And so these Article 78s, and we're fortunate because it makes life a lot more interesting, and we get some interesting cases. These big cases come from all over the state, and it's a chance to really get your teeth into something interesting. And so Supreme Court in and of itself is a pretty great job, but because we're in Albany, we get some really, really interesting cases that arise out of it.
Well, I can imagine, too, and one of the types of cases that you've mentioned, which is headlines every day, news broadcasts every day, foreclosure actions. And we hear reports from around the country that people are losing their homes, they can't make their mortgage payments, and it seems to have a ripple effect right through the financial markets. And some experts have suggested that certain financial institutions down at Wall Street have failed because of certain issues involving subprime loans. Have you seen an increase here as a Supreme Court judge in the number of foreclosure petitions that are filed?
Well, it's funny that you ask that. You know, it's now current news. But I'm going to say about a year ago, we started seeing a tremendous increase in volume. And I'm going to say there's 15 judges just Albany and Rensselaer and Ulster County. And those cases are divided up relatively equally. And I'll bet you that I'm signing on average one foreclosure judgment a day. And if you multiply that times the number of judges, times the number of days,
You bet.
you know, the volume is unbelievable. And we were talking about it before the show started. And one of the things, and I hadn't really given it that much thought until we started kind of working our way backwards, and I did a lot of foreclosures when I was in private practice, and I know that we would not, as attorneys, we would not get the file from a bank until they had probably written letters for 3, 4, maybe 5 months trying to get paid. And then we would take the file and we would write a letter once a month for maybe 3 months. By the time we started the foreclosure, had 30 days to wait for an answer, and the people, and these, by the way, these judgments are default judgments where people just aren't paying and can't pay, and they don't even appear.
They don't even answer when the summons is brought to their house and the petition is, for foreclosure is brought to their house. They don't even respond.
Correct.
Okay.
And very often you'll see, you know, a type of service we call nail and mail. They're not even there anymore. They're already gone.
Already gone.
But if you work your way back, and if the increase in volume started a year ago that I was seeing judgments, it had to be a year to maybe a year and a half before that the actual volume of defaults started. So it's current news now, and the government hopefully will do something about it, but this is a 2.5 year old problem, and it's a major, major problem.
You know, there was a piece in local print media this week setting forth how the time it takes to do a foreclosure in a variety of states, and the suggestion was that it took the longest in New York to actually bring a foreclosure to fruition. Based on what you've told me, both from your private practice experience and how they are handled, it certainly can be a 24-month process from the time the person made their last payment to the time the bank gets the property.
Right. I mean, and you know, you can take a situation where they make no payments and it's going to take that long. But as we all know, the first inclination on the part of these lenders is to work with the
Sure.
debt. Well, okay, we'll waive that late payment. Now can you start, you don't have to pay the arrears, we'll add the payment onto the end, and you know, we'll try and do this and we'll try and do that. So, you know, these things, the problem starts 2 or 3 years before the actual first default, and then once there's the first default, it goes for a while. These are 2 or 3 year old problems, and the volume started to increase based on what I think is a 2 or 3 year problem. My fear is that it's going to increase further, and we're seeing it.
Right, you're seeing the economic issues in the courthouse every day, and how
Right.
these citizens are being impacted.
Right. And I think the other thing I would add, and we were talking about it earlier, is in all the foreclosures that I'm talking about, that I've personally seen, not one has been contested.
Right.
You know, these are people that they can't pay, they've thrown up their hands.
They don't even enter an answer to the papers.
They don't hire an attorney,
Right.
They don't try and fight it, and there's a lot of people losing their homes.
Well, Judge, there's no question you're extremely busy as a Supreme Court Justice, and I know that you're busy raising a beautiful family as well, and I think they've got you busy in a variety of extracurricular activities. Is that right, Judge?
Well, I think my job is a Supreme Court judge and chauffeur,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
as I know you are, too.
Yes, that's right. You know,
We're at every different athletic event we can get to.
That's right. We're valets, and
Yes.
It would be fun to have somebody pick you up every day and take you to the next sporting event, and then
I'm
bring
looking
you
for
back.
one of those.
I know. Well, they've certainly. Your children have distinguished themselves in the Colonie school districts as well, and Colonie is very lucky to have you and your family here, and sharing your background and experience, and on the bench here as a Supreme Court Justice for the
You're
state
too
of New
kind.
York.
You're too kind. And I would say the same to you. You know, you've been town court judge, which I alluded earlier to running for office. That was one of the, not against you,
Yeah.
but that was one of the offices I ran for. And I was joking around with the judge earlier, and I said, about midway through the summer when I was appearing in Colonie Town Court as an attorney, and I left one night at 9:30, and I looked, and there were still several, I'm going to say many people there from the jail, many people sitting in the courtroom, and I knew they were going to be there till midnight. I began to question my sanity in running for your job.
Well, we keep at it every
You
day.
do a good job at it.
Well, and thank you for joining us today, Judge, very much. I'm Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.